Okay, so I hope my screen is visible to everybody.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, so today we're going to start with the, with the module, with the next module. So I think last week or the last class we did see a practical analysis on how the bots being created, and we have seen certain examples of uipath, and so how tool looks like and what are the various things, and I think I ran certain bots for you guys to see. So before we go ahead, any questions from the previous session where we discussed about the tool and some hands-on? So if you have any queries, I think yeah, we can have that. You can put it in the chat as well, so that we can have a quick discussion at the end of the session. So
Um,
for sorry, go ahead. Who is this?
yeah. On assignment 4,
Mm-hmm.
I was not able to understand the section 2, that goes like perform a technical feasibility study for RPA with respect to various application integration with uipath bot development. I was unable to know what exactly the question was.
Okay. So technical feasibility study with respect to application integration, right? So I think we did speak about the topic of feasibility study analysis and then technical feasibility study, right? We discussed about certain checklists that becomes mandatory, or as an industry best practice that we follow when we do a feasibility study, I mean technical feasibility study, in order to understand whether the applications that are involved in the you know process of automation are potential or feasible, or UiPath is able to communicate with those applications, because it's all about enacting what a human does, right? So UiPath must be able to interact, or must be, the two digital systems or two applications must be able to communicate with each other. So what I wanted in that specific session, I mean assignment, was, so let's say if you are having certain applications, there might be more than one application involved in a project. So you can take any application as an example for your assignment. You can take an SAP system, any ERP system. You can take any of the modern ticketing tool like ServiceNow, Salesforce, anything. Okay, any two or three applications that you take, okay, and try to analyze or find out the points that you as a business analyst. So when you do a process evaluation, let's say I give you two tools. Okay, my process is to fetch data from ServiceNow and put it back to Salesforce. Okay, these are the two applications involved. So when we develop the board on an application integration side, that means the UiPath application should be able to interact with the ServiceNow application to fetch the data, and it should also be able to interact with Salesforce to put the data back, right? So the bot should be able to talk both ways. So let's say when we decide a bot like this, what are the technical feasibility checklist that you would think that is required? So you can go back and refer the feasibility study, that checklist or the table that we created, but don't copy it exactly in this way. But yes, majority of the steps are there. Majority of the steps are similar. But what I expect is, you put, if even though you are using the similar ones, expect you to write on the comments panel that what is the why you have chosen that specific parameter. Let's say we had the separate table for server deployment. If my bot is going to be deployed on a server, we have to do a separate 6 to 7 extra points that are needs to be analyzed in terms of deploying, right? So this is how you map it. You take any two three applications for your reference purpose, and start building up a feasibility plan that you would undergo for those applications, considering that these are the part of your automation project. Okay,
Okay.
perfect. Thanks for bringing that out. Okay, I got the confirmation that it's visible to everybody. Okay, so guys, today's session, we're gonna talk about our module six. I think we are almost on the halfway mark of the the course content or the process map. I mean the course abstract that we have. So this is one of the topic where we are standing right at the middle juncture of the course. Okay, so we started with a lot of analysis, opportunity assessment, feasibility study, various aspects, roles involved. Then we saw certain uh, bots that gets created. We got an understanding of the uipath tool, that it has three very important aspects. One is the uipath studio that helps us to program or code the bots. Then we have uipath robot is nothing but the the component that executes the actual process that we have coded. And orchestrator is actually a web deployment tool which comes in through uh, UiPath, and any of my bot that goes to the server needs to be deployed on the orchestrator level. So if you guys have any questions when you based on that specific session on the tool side, right? Because so what I do is after we cover a few more topics on the analysis side, I'll try to have one more session, on the UiPath tool again, so that we again get a refresher, and I'm going to show you guys few more projects of bots that how it is developed, what it execute, and all those things. So that becomes more relevant for you guys once we go through two to three. I mean this module and the next module tomorrow. So after that, probably next week we'll again have a tool session so that you can have a relevance of understanding, and also the assignment that you're going to have will be very much useful. So today's topic, I mean this week's topic is pretty much into a process deep dive. So I want you guys to kind of focus and ask questions. If you don't understand, there might be certain topics or certain aspects which are outside the RPA concept or the framework. But since we are talking about a process analysis and a process deep dive, there would be certain parameters and frameworks or some aspects that might not be within the RPA, but yes, that might be something related to process improvement, or related to business analysis and all those things. So we try to analyze as much as possible. Okay, so if you guys have any questions, I expect you to put it in the chat or keep it aside so that we'll have a quick Q&A session at the end so that we can get those clarified. But yeah, this is one of the very important topic wherein when you start working as a business analyst in RPA, this is where, see, before today, whatever we spoke about was all my understanding purpose, right? My you know I should say that the preparation steps that we do in order to, kind of come to the main process. So from here, it's the main process where these are like result oriented, where you have to start mapping the process, design the documents, talk to the business guys, talk to the solution guys, act as an active analyst there. So this, from here to next 2 3 sessions, would be our practical implementation of the work that we're going to do. Currently what we have is a prior knowledge of my process analysis or the deep dive that the various parameters or various aspects that we kind of require. But this is actually the practical due diligence which we have to do. So in a process deep dive analysis, I just want to recap certain parts from our previous classes. So we remember that we spoke about the opportunity assessment in detail, the feasibility study, right? The various process opportunities, the inputs, the output parameters, and all those things. So just as a quick reminder, so when we will take those points itself as a in our session today, but we will have an in-depth analysis of the certain important parameters or characters that we need day in and day out, and those which plays a very vital role when you design those documents, solution documents or process documents, and becomes an essence or an asset for the entire project or the developers and everything. So the prerequisite that we know when we are analyzing a process, last time we understood that gathering and understanding the requirements and the process related documents, the process maps, the operating procedure, the organizational charts, the user manuals, these are the prerequisite that helps us or that might give us an idea about the process that we are going to automate. So how do we, what are the aspects that we take into consideration to understand the process? A business analyst would have to require or would have to go through the process maps, the various operating structure, how the business runs, okay, the organizational charts, if there are any hierarchical approach to the process, right? So why I'm talking about the organizational chart is, let's say there are certain project automation projects that comes in where the bot requires or the bot that is designed have to send out communication to various level of people. So let's say there is a ticketing or a notification automation that happens wherein certain documents are sent to somebody. So once the documents are ready, the people goes and runs the bot. What the bot is doing is the bot will pick up those documents from this location and do some processing and start sending it to people for various uh, approval, right? Documents approval, let's say. So now let's say it has sent the documents to four people, okay? People one, people two, person two, person one, person two, person three, and person four. Now, let's say the bot is designed in such a way that it keeps a track of out of these four people who has replied or who has not. And let's say these people are in a hierarchical level, right? Let's say it's a level one is a tech team lead, level two is a manager, level three is a business unit head, and level four is a director, something like that. So you have to understand on an organizational side also for those processes that how the organization hierarchy is and how in what sequence the bot should be sending the email. So it's sometimes what happens is it first sends to the level one, which is a team lead. Once the team lead approves, the bot has to capture that the team lead has approved. Then only it has to send the second approval to the manager. Unless and until the team lead approves, the bot should not send out it to the manager. Or if the team lead rejects, the bot should not send out those documents to the manager because it got rejected at level one itself. It should send out a notification to the user that hey, your document has been rejected and these are the changes that has been asked to be made. So there is a similar way. So the user, so the level one manager might reply it in an email. So what the bot needs to do, the bot is designed in such a way that any rejection email comes, that will be forwarded to the business user so that he or she can go back and work on the document and then make some changes and again run the bot, and so that the bot picks up the updated documents and starts sending the process. So where this are certain sort of processes where your operating procedure or your organizational structure becomes very important. Okay, so as a process analysis, what we do is we have to gather and understand the process and the relevant documents, and these are our sources of input that comes in for as a prerequisite. And what we are aiming at, and our aiming is pretty much simple, that we are aiming that we do a deep understanding of the process, validate the process owner as is process. So we have already seen what is an as is process. So as is process is nothing but currently how the process is being done or being conducted by the operations or your business team manually. What are the steps they are doing, what are the actions they are taking, what are the various exceptions that their business exceptions they are following, is what comes under as is process. As is process is your exact the way business is running it. Okay, so we have to validate how the as is process is. Now we go back after we design, validate the as is process and the bot is designed, the design to be process flow. So to be process flow, we're going to talk about this as well today, as is and to be process flow. So to be process flow is nothing but how the bot is going to do it. Once it is automated, all these tasks are automated, or let's say a project is not 100% automation potential, a portion of it is automated. So how does the involvement of human and the remaining portion done by the bot to be, you know, integrated? So that's my to be process. So that also needs to be properly analyzed in terms of how the process is going to be, in terms of the to be process, comparing it to the as is process. Okay, now for my as is process, my to be process, all my validations, what do we have it? We have a high level handover so you have to generally have a high level and hand over an effective and informative design document to the development team. So that's what we aim at. So we, as a business analyst, have certain prerequisite. We have our inputs of process map, operating procedure, organization structures, manuals from where we go and gather knowledge and understand the process. Then we aim at creating the process, right? Understanding those processes, validating the as is process, and design the to be process, create a high level document, and ensure that we hand over an effective and an informative design document to the development team. Because unless and until my research is correct, the development team, the bot developed by the developers will not be robust, because the developers generally blindly follow the process design document which is given to them, right? So unless and until you have a very much experienced developer who knows about all processes in and out, they might not come and question back. Okay, so they would just go and blindly follow whatever is designed in the given in the documentation. So our aim is to give an effective and informative design document so that the development goes smooth and they don't have to come back to us again and again that, hey, I did not understand this requirement, I did not understand this portion. So there might be cases where obviously they would come back, but it's the matter of how repetitive they are coming. If you have designed a document which is not at all understandable to the development team and they're coming and chasing us every day, so that's not a good sign of an effective document which is created, right? So we aim at creating that. And what is our approach should be? High level discussion of process and walkthrough. Okay, understand the process complexity and challenges, capture process metrics, prepare the PDD, mark in scope and out of scope activities. So once we aim at designing a document, how do we achieve that aim? So we should have an approach to that, right? So our approach would be that we have to design those high level documentation of process, for which we should have a process discussion and a process workflow regularly with the business SMEs or whoever the process experts are. Then we understand what is the process complexity. We spoke very much about the understanding of complexity, right? We understand the process complexity, and if there are any challenges, we also try to capture the process metrics. Okay, we're going to talk about this topic as well. Then we then we start designing the document, and then we also mark what is our in scope and out scope activity. That means, let's say once you have a project identified, there'll be like 100 200 steps involved. So there might be certain activities which might be not falling in the scope of automation. Okay, so those are to be marked as out of scope so that it becomes very clear. Let's say, as I said, that some project may not be 100% automation potential. So what happens is, let's say out 80% is automation potential, 20% is not. So what we do, we say that these are the 80% portion which are in scope. That means will be falling under the project criteria or the automation or the activity that the bot is going to do. But this 20% is out of scope, wherein we need a human involvement to validate or to perform this. So this becomes our 20% becomes our out of scope activity. And this in scope and out of scope is very, very important in your process design document, because if eventually something goes wrong, okay, the bot is not able to do something, the client might come and ask you, hey, you have designed a bot but it's missing to do this. Then what they do, we go and show you that, hey, this is the design document which we got signatured from you, and this, and we refer them or we ask them to go to the reference point and see, hey, can you just refer to the out of scope activity? So this portion was out of scope in our previous analysis, hence the bot is not taking care of those tasks, because we already marked it as out of scope and it has been signed by, the sign off has been given from your end. So we have to go back and tell the client, right? Because a lot of practical situation, client manager who has approved it would have changed. There's a new manager and he's saying, hey, why this is not being done? So we show them proof that this is what we approved, you guys approved, and based on that the bot has been designed. So there are a lot of practical scenarios that gets involved. So in terms of the deep dive analysis, we take the prerequisite in our understanding. We see the aim that we are having, what we are trying to achieve, and then we see the approach, what makes us do that, right? Now, Once we take a specific process, we have to now understand the process analysis and the various methods or the steps in the entire analysis life cycle. So we call it as process life cycle analysis. So in the process analysis, it straightforward directly starts with requirements gathering. Requirements gathering would be the entire process that we have learned till date. Okay. Then we move on to high level process maps and documentation is what we are currently now in. So we are trying to understand how do we design the process map and documentation, how it needs to be created. Then it's review. So whatever basic or high level is not an final one. Okay. Remember, whenever we see the word high level, it's like say you can say it's like a testimonial where we have a specific requirement design or process design which is awaiting approval. It's just a high level. There might be changes based on the review. So then this document goes for a review. Then include more scenarios in business rules. So let's say in review it got discussed that we are not having much scenarios in business rules captured. Okay, so it might be like let's say five, four extra scenarios might be needed, three business cases extra that might to be needed. So when we do an internal review or a peer review or a client review, the client would have suggested, no, you have to add this. So we come back and do those work, and then it goes for a second review. Okay, in second review, after the second review, as per the process, generally it might be your L2, L3, L4, whatever level you have in your organization. Here it should, it's a level 4 process map and process description. So once your process is reviewed second time, it goes to a level 4 or your experts or your managers or your team lead so that they can, perform the final validation. Okay, then we talk about the to-be process map and solution description. So once our requirements in process map and designs are done, we go and start designing the PDD. Okay, that means the analysis of the to-be process, what exactly needs to be done, how the bot is going to perform, and all these things. And finally, we send the PDD to the client. Okay, after all the reviews and all the changes being made, and get the sign off. So this is what the sign off I was talking about. So let's say your client manager has signed it off, we designed the bot. Let's say the manager got changed after 2 months and the new manager came and evaluated the bot's performance and identified, no, this process, why the bot is not able to do that. Then we go back and say, hey, the approval that we got from your end was that this 20% of the process was out of scope, and this was the 80% which was in scope, and this is how the bot has been designed. Okay, so there's a lot of referential documents that gets created to handle such abrupt business scenarios on your day-to-day life. So this is the entire process roadmap or the process analysis life cycle that goes on. So until and unless you have your PDD sign off, you cannot pass it over to your development team. So and the development cannot start. So this is the life cycle for entire analysis of my business process that would get into the development. Now the developers will have their own process life cycle where they typically follow the software design life cycle where they will get into the designing, they will solution it, they will code it, they will test it, they will implement it. So that's the developer's life cycle. This is the business analyst life cycle. So every role has an entire process or a sequence of life cycle through which they get in, right? So various steps are involved. Okay. So before we move ahead, any questions on the process life cycle? On these, various like 8 steps that we have seen. Any questions on this? Any open questions?
Hi, Paul. Bob here. Now, as far
Mhm.
as the documentation is concerned, will you be providing us with like sample documentation?
Yes. So tomorrow's session we're going to be entirely focusing on creation of a PDD. Okay, so we have certain sample documents from uipath which they have, they share. So I'm going to give it to you guys as well. We're going to take a sample document of uipath PDD and analyze the entire document of how it is created, why this is created, what are the parameters. So we will take a dummy project and we will see that how a relevant PDD got created for that project, and we would try to do a relevance, and we'll do an entire due diligence on that process design document. We will do that.
All right, good. And another question. Now,
Mhm.
I understand that most of this documentation will be done by the business analyst, but is there any documentations that are done by the developers?
Oh yes, developers do the DSD, which is called as design solution document. So once the PDD is created, which is the business analyst's role, where they do the process due diligence and create the process design document, and it goes to the solutioning guys, right? So the solutioning guys and the developers combinedly create the solution design document, where the solutioning in terms of technicalities and all those things are there. In the process design document also we have a solution description. This is like how the bot is going to perform or the logical steps. This is what comes in. But in a solution design document that gets created, it will have all the various technical aspects. In the coding part, they would have used a lot of variables. They would have used a lot of programming activities, uipath activities, and they would have passed on values from this function to this function. A lot of things comes in. So that needs to be also documented, right? So that gets documented on a design solution design document, which is a reference point that comes from in combination with the solution architect and the developer.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Perfect, no problem. Any other open questions?
And those solution design documents, it's each document for each bot, right? Not just one
Oh,
document for all the bots, right?
nope, nope, nope. Correct. Yeah. So your process document also might be many. What happens is, if a business process is very complex, and it's involving a lot of steps, what the companies or the business team sometimes do, I mean, generally the business analysts they do is they divide the activities into sprints and I mean, in terms of agile methodology, if you look into the agile concept, nowadays, it's very important that you are releasing a portion of your product and giving it to the client at each and every phase so that you make the client engaged, so that they understand that some work is going on. But whereas in typical waterfall method, we see that, you start a project or a process and you get the end product at the end of 6 months, 7 months. So the client also becomes frustrated, right? And after 6 months you want to share the product and they're going to review, and they ask for any changes, you come back and start developing again. So here what they do is, let's say it's a very complex project with a lot of steps, they divide the process into sprints. So what they do is they will have a sprint one where they will release certain portion of the bot. Sprint two, they will release certain portion of the bot. So based on that, the documentations also might vary. So in that case, might your RPA or your whoever is the authority team or the managers would say, okay, so we'll have a documents designed based on each sprint. So whatever activities or completion is done in sprint one, we will have a process design document for that, and we will have a solution design document for that. Next, when we move on to the sprint two, we'll have similarly design document two, solution design document two, and then when we have the sprint three released, we will have this, and then all these reference documents would be clubbed together. I mean, once the entire product is released, so our reference documents are created in each and every phase. So we eventually save time at the end. So it's all up to how the operating model is, and it's not confined that you have to follow in hard and fast rule, but these are the standard modules of the processes, and it can be tweaked anytime based on your organizational or your current project or your client requirement. Okay. So hope that answers your question.
Yeah, we're good.
Perfect. Thank you. So moving on to the next phase. Yeah. So from here, we're going to talk about certain mandatory points when we do a requirements gathering. And guys, this is as I was talking about, the various parameters. Okay. Um, we talk about the process, we talk about the process metrics and all those things. So requirements gathering mandatory points. Okay, so what is the thing that we need when we are trying to analyze the requirements completion or the requirements gathering that we have? And these are the certain points or aspects that are required for us to be mentioned in our documentations that we create. Okay, so the first one that we talk about is the process metrics. So when we were discussing about, if I go back 2 slides, So we were talking about capturing the process metrics on the approach, right? So this is the process matrix we're going to look into. So what is the process matrix involvement is, so the process metrics involvement, it is captured with the help of existing workflows or BPM tools. Now, as I said at the starting of the session, that there will be some portion or some framework or some names or some aspects or some parameters which are outside the RPA framework but being utilized as a part of the business process analysis. And these are something which goes beyond RPA. So, for example, you might have a question: what is a BPM tool, right? So, BPM is nothing but business process management. So, as we have RPA, which is robotics process automation, there was a framework called as BPM where certain business processes were automated, and there were a lot of tools that came in into the market probably 3-4 years back. There were a lot of BPM tools that gives you the process analysis. If you want to evaluate how effective is your process, okay, is it the optimized one? So there were a lot of tools that used to help you. So you had to give the input data, the and design, customize the model, and it would have given you an output based on the parameters that you set. So certain companies use those BPM tools, to talk about, to understand or to do a process deep dive and understand the process metrics. Okay, so how much SLA you are meeting, what are the deadlines of various projects. So all those things are given as an input to the BPM tool so that you have a visualized data set that comes up. So BPM is all about the business, and when certain portion of processes were used to be automated as well using the BPM tools, but there's a lot of difference about it. So you can Google out, there's a common question that goes in: difference between a BPM and an RPA. So these are two different platforms. So you can Google that out and get to understand the differences between all, what is the BPM does and what is an RPA do. So generally, in layman term, RPA is all about automating or enacting what a human action is all about and perform steps. BPM tools were about analyzing process metrics and then automate certain aspects of the process. So I haven't done much analysis on the BPM, so you guys can Google it out and get the differences between a BPM and then RPA, and it will be good for your knowledge. Okay, then so once we try to capture a process metrics, we take it the help of various other inputs or various other frameworks. So BPM tool is one of them. Then certain companies take MI data. Now, what is an MI data? The MI data is nothing but it's a management information, okay, that represents the process to apply to the data and convert them into a real-time management information. So let's say you have a lot of process data. Now, when the higher management is not involved at the ground level and they don't want all your relevant, process or ground level work related data. So what the people, that's why, various managers, they would try to take the business data and they create reports to present it to higher management, right? So those are real data that gets converted into management information. So management information in most of the organization will be for monitoring and reporting of the business, which incorporates a lot of dashboards, pie charts, bar graphs, and all those things. These are your MI data. Then comes time and motion study. Now, what is a time and motion study? It is a business efficiency technique, once again, that goes outside the business or the RPA framework. Various companies go, when they do a requirements analysis and gathering, they do a process matrix, okay, and they take the help of time and motion technique. Using this, production measurement, delivery times, and prices can be computed. So if you want to understand production measurement, what are your deliverables time, how much prices are being quoted to the clients, and all those things, it's a separate project management related or a process related technique that people go in time and motion study. So these are certain extra framework, additional framework that gets added to the process analysis. So to understand the process metrics, okay. And then in the process metrics, with the help of all this data, we try to understand three things. What is the volume? What is AHT? AHT is nothing but average handling time, and the total FTE effort involved in the process. So my process metrics analysis with all this framework gives me three things. Okay. One is I'm trying to understand the volume. how much volume of work is there, how much volume of data gets generated, how much volume of inflow. It's if it's a ticketing team, or let's say people who work at a ticketing call center level and you are trying to automate something. So what is the volume of calls that they receive and the manual work they do, and all these things comes under volume. HT is average handling time. If somebody is working at a, let's say you're automating a ticketing process and you have people who are working on tickets. So you have to, we analyze how much time each and individual takes for how many types of tickets that we have, how much time is required for each and every category of ticket for an individual to work on. So all these calculation comes in under AHT. Okay, total FTE effort involved. Again, FTE we have seen task number of tasks into amount of task, then that gets multiplied with your assignment factor and all those things, and we calculate the FTE, right? So all these calculations that you do before, you have to get in the values and fit in here, right? So this is what is our process metrics. I think I just made a change here. So the name was similar, so I'm just changing it. So this is input slash output matrix. Sorry, it was okay. So then we talk about the inputs and output metrics. Okay, so input and output metrics would be talking about my various open and close items, time dependencies and SLAs. So what are my process metrics for SLA? Okay, what are the various open items, the close items, how much time it is involving? Okay, expected increase in volume. Okay, so if there will be, as I was talking in few classes, right, that let's say we automate a project where at the month, starting of the month, we have very low requests or low tickets that come in, but the process is like at the end of the month the volume increases, right? If it's a financial project, obviously at the starting of the month you will have a huge volume of data that comes in, because all this billing cycle gets started at the end of the month to the starting of the month. So last week and the first week of the month is where your task or volume gets increased, your invoices gets processed, right, for the payment release. So what duration your input and output expectation is there for an increase in volume? This is one thing. Stakeholders involvement and the role. So here we also analyze who would be involved, who are the all stakeholders at each and every role. Let's say when you do a process analysis, you should have account managers, you should have SMEs, you should have business owners, you should have process owners. So each of those various people and what are their roles and which phase they're involved, these are also analyzed. My inputs and input type, as we already spoke a lot about it, right? That my input can be structured, unstructured, standard, non-standard. What is my output and output type? So all these things are, one of the mandatory points that we analyze when we design the document. So these are the points we have to put in the document. So that's why we are trying to pre-evaluate some of the mandatory points. Then we get into the infrastructure requirement. We have seen in the technical feasibility study as well that when we do a server deployment, we have certain extra features or certain extra points that we try to validate and perform certain work on it, right? We do certain extra technical feasibility in terms of deployment. What is the infrastructure bandwidth? If I do not have an infrastructure of hosting 20 bots, what is the use of developing 20 bots, right? So my infrastructure requirement here it goes into test environment availability, as I spoke about, right? That whether the application that you are working on has the test environment available or not, because no bots can be developed on a live environment of a application or a production environment. So definitely there has to be a testing environment for that application or all the applications that are involved in the entire project. Then UiPath hardware or software requirements. So what are the various other software requirements that you might need? Okay, so what is there any hardware requirements? So generally hardware requirement doesn't come in the automation projects because it's all about your softwares, your data is digital. But in terms of infrastructural side, sometimes, but not sometimes, but when you have servers, virtual machines, these are actually physically hosted somewhere, right? So if we go into too much of process analysis, I mean too much of technical feasibility or these are actually for the implementation guys. So let's say you have one single VM or virtual machine and you have 20 projects that are running daily, so your machine is overutilized. So there, sometimes they try to understand how many CPUs are there in your virtual machine. What is the core? Is it what is the instance of how large is your RAM of the server and all these things. They try to make a note of it so that whenever there is an increase in volume and all those things, it gets it's already pre-documented and something like that. So that's one of the hardware is an optional, but software requirements are captured properly. Then uipath development and production, server deployment planning and scope. That means once your bots are ready, it needs to be deployed on the server, right? So what is your development? So as I said, that when the bot goes for testing, it goes to the development server or the development of uipath orchestrator, and then when the testing is approved, it goes to the production server. So you should have a bit of planning given to the client or in your process design document about the development of server plan. So what is the plan, what is the scope, and what is the production implementation, and all these things are there. Then we talk about in the infrastructure requirements, the uipath bot type analysis. So is this going to be an attended bot? Is this going to be an unattended bot? So if it is an attended bot, obviously it's going to not run on the server, it's going to run on a mostly on the desktop level, right? So we have if it's an attended, we don't have to do the server deployment part because we're going to eventually run it on a local system. Okay, so all these things would help you would get it from your solution architects or the developer team. Is there a question? Oh, perfect. Bob already has put down a list of BPM tools in the Facebook group. Oh, that's great. Hey, thanks for sharing this, Bob. So yeah, with respect to the analysis, if it goes as an unattended, that means the bot needs to be deployed on the server, right? And when it goes to unattended, we know that there are various ways that we can schedule the bot. So we have to also know from the client that at what time, at what pace, at what time zone and all these things they need the bot to be executed. So that's why under unattended, we also need to document the scheduling details from the client. Okay, now the next 2 points that we have for the requirements analysis would be applications involved, and I'm talking about this in again and again because it's very important. The application involved, we know, as we just spoke at the beginning of the session, right, that I might have 2 to 3 applications involved in my project. So which I mean the question was asked to me, right, that about the application integration. So that's what, so you have to do a due diligence on all the various applications that are involved in the project. So understand and capture underlying technology of each and every application involved. So you have to understand the technology of those applications, like if I talk about Salesforce, how does the Salesforce behave, how does the service now behave, all these understanding of the technology of application needs to be captured. Availability of access for bot login and application test environment. Okay, so again I'm talking about the application test environment availability, which is again a very important aspect. Now, why did I mention about the bot login? So what is happening is in certain companies, they are ready to give credentials which are being only utilized by robots. Okay, but in certain companies, they still haven't brought that culture of giving robot IDs. They say, what if somebody misuses those credentials and does something we will not be able to track? So on the security or the compliance side, they don't allow any robot IDs to be given. So we have to ensure that whatever, if the robot ID is not given, generally it's the developer's ID that goes in, okay, to log into the server and all those things that comes in. And for application, you give the access to the developer so that the developer can use his or her ID to have it designed. So you have to check all this availability of access, whether the organization compliance tells you to have a bot login created. You have to request for a bot login along with by in collaboration with your business team, and you have to simultaneously get an access to the application test environment as well. Now different instances of one application. Again, now when we are talking about the application involvement, we might have different instances of one application. Let's say one application will have login module, then it will have the interface, then the the logout module, and all those things. So certain applications, once you log in, you need to log out unless and until you complete the login logout process. Okay, Next time when the bot logs in, the application will throw you some error that your previous session is still running. You have to terminate the session, or your session got terminated, something like that. Okay, so for example, if you have your Google Chrome opened, just go and kill your Google Chrome process. Next time you open the Google Chrome, it will give you a pop-up. You want to restore the process. So these are all application related scenarios, so which also needs to be considered. So if you are dealing with mainframe systems, ERP systems, SAP systems, those login modules and various instances of application needs to be captured. Is there any disruption that might happen? Okay, so these are all, it comes under your application involvement. And then comes the last point, which is your thick or thin client. So what is a thick or a thin client? As I told you earlier, if your process is related to a remote application or remote desktop, which is running virtually somewhere else, or if it is connecting through any Citrix VDI, virtual desktop interface, those are called as thin clients. Okay, thin clients are nothing but application that runs remotely and doesn't have a local storage device. Okay, and whereas a thick client is actually is your laptop, is your computer, which is running applications on a desktop level and has a storage associated with it. Okay, so remember the definition of a thick and a thin client always. It's very important, not even in RP, anywhere. A thin client is something which runs applications remotely over a remote desktop or a virtual desktop interface and do not have any local storage, do not have much local storage. It will only run on your RAM. It will not have any specific hard drive attached to it. But in case of a thick client, is all our laptops or computers that we have, which runs on a desktop level and runs applications and have a hard drive or a device or a storage associated with it. So these are our various mandatory points that get into the analysis of requirements gathering. So when we are doing the analysis of the process and coming into the requirements gathering phase, all these various important aspects needs to be added. Okay, these are the certain points that would get into your documentation of process design document as well. So before we move on to the next topic, any open questions from this current requirements discussion that we had? Any open questions from anybody?
Paul,
Mm-hmm.
I have, I think I'm confused. Can you give us an example of a desktop application, I think you said, and a remote desktop thing?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, perfect. So it's all about the difference of a thick and a thin client. Okay, let me explain it into this way. Now let's say, what is a thin client and what is a thick client, right? So I'll start with the thick client. So thick client, we call it as we all our laptops that we have, right? We have a laptop, we have a desktop at our office or at home. So all those laptops or desktops run applications within themselves. So let's say you open your computer, you open Google Chrome, you're trying to browse. So what you are doing, your laptop you have opened, which is there in your I mean physically there. Inside that you have logged in, and then you have opened the application Google Chrome, and you are trying to browse over the internet, right? So that means your desktop or your computer or your laptop is running the application of Google Chrome right there in your system. Okay, so those systems or those laptops that we have where the applications are running within the computer, okay, and the computer or the machine itself has a storage. Your laptop will definitely have a hard drive, right? So these desktops which runs applications locally and has a hard drive attached to it are called as thick client. It's just a methodology, it's just a IT term, you can say, to differentiate between computers that are locally running and computers that are remotely running applications. Now, what is a thin client? So, for example, thin clients are nothing but when you are working in a client project location. Okay, when you are working for a specific client, your office might have given you a laptop, but you need to connect to the client's network, or you need to connect to the client's environment to access all the client application. You cannot do it from your office computer. So what do? You have your computer, you connect to the VPN of your office, virtual private network. They will have your VPN set up. So you are connected to the secure network of your office now using your public internet. Then what we do is we remotely log into the client's environment. So we have Microsoft's remote desktop system, or Citrix applications, where we are sitting in one location using our office computer, but I am accessing the environment of my client, which is hosted somewhere else. Okay, so what we do, these are the remote desktop or the Citrix VDI are the ways to log in to my client's environment. So I will use those process, and I will log in with my user ID and password, and I will get to access all the applications of my client. So my client's applications are not installed on my computer, it's installed somewhere else. I am sitting somewhere else. My laptop is connected over the internet to the VPN, and I'm using certain remote applications to access those applications. Those are called thin clients. Hope I'm able to explain the point.
Yeah, I thought so. I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
Perfect. So
And
it's clear to
just to add on that, you're most likely gonna be using Dean client a lot when you go to a project, because most of the time you go with some work at home and you have to have access to your, to your computer in the office. So you're gonna use a lot of that. Just to add on that.
Oh yeah, true. So I had a client last time when I was working in some previous company. So the organization gave me a thin client. It's a laptop. So it doesn't have any hard drive. It just runs on the RAM. So the RAM is just enough to, I mean, there is a storage, else how will you install the operating system? So there is a minimal storage just to install the operating system, and it runs on RAM. And you cannot install even Google Chrome into it. It's not allowed because it doesn't have space. Okay, so predefined, it has I mean Internet Explorer and all those things. But yeah, what we have to do, the purpose is, once my laptop is open, I have to open remote desktop session, put the IP address, put the user ID password, and remotely connect to my client's network. There I have, in that virtual machine to which I have connected, there I have all the applications of the client, and I have to access it. So it's like my client applications are not there on my computer, but still I'm accessing it remotely. That becomes thin. Okay, so certain projects involve this sort of concept, so that's why it's very important to have a due diligence done for that as well. Now we're going to talk about the high level process map. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier a couple of minutes back, that when we are doing a process analysis, we do an as is process and a to be process. Now how do we do that? Okay, so when we look into a high level process map, so we have an as is process which is currently being developed by or followed by the business team. They are manually working on it. They're doing manually all the work. Okay, so we do an analysis of the current as is process. So now if you look at the top first diagram, you have step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, which are carried by or performed by various people. Now step 1 have utilization of 3 applications. Step 2 also uses 3 applications. Step 4 also uses 3 applications. Now this application marked as 1 to 3 might be similar at each and every step, or might be different. That we don't know. Okay, so that gets based upon your process. So at the very top, which is my step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, here I am analyzing my process step. So for example, if I take a reporting project as an automation, my step 1 is to log into the application. Okay, so let's say I'm logging into a ServiceNow application. So my step 1 would be application involved is ServiceNow, application involved is Google Chrome. Guys, please focus here because I'm talking about the project design document. So here we are retrospecting how the design document should be there and the scenarios would be documented. So it will help you to create or understand tomorrow's session when we take an example and understand the design documentation. So let's say I am working on a reporting project, or I am evaluating a reporting project where I am designing the as is process model. So what we do is we understand that reporting project is a first step where we need to log into the ServiceNow application. So that means step 1 is to log in. Now Now it involves two application. One is Google Chrome, another is ServiceNow. Okay, you have to take consideration of the, see, we are just enacting what a human does. So obviously a reporting guy should first open the browser, then only go to the application and then log in, right? He cannot directly log into the application without a browser. So we have to consider the process as it is done by the process team. So that's why it's as is process. That's why we are saying I'm also including that somebody is going to open the Google Chrome, because the bot also eventually needs to open the Google Chrome, right? So step one is this. Step two is, once my logging in is done, let's say I'm going to click on a button, okay, and I'm going to choose my client name in the service now. So my step two is click on a button, choose the client name, and my application involved is again Google Chrome and service now. Let's say step three, I have to download the report. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, my step three is again application is Google Chrome and another application I am using is service now. Step three is to click on the download button, save the file. Okay, this is my step three. My step four is to send out an email to my customers or clients with the downloaded report attachment. So my step four is to send out an email and attach the documents and send out an email. This is my step four. Now my applications involved here are Outlook or Gmail, okay, because I'm sending out an email. Microsoft Office, because my attachment might be an Excel file, might be a PDF file, then it's Adobe PDF reader, whatever it is being used, that becomes my application too. So now I just imagine how you have to break it down and involve each and every application at each and every step. So you cannot just say, okay, I'm sending an email, so I'm going to just mention it as Outlook or Gmail. But your email is having an attachment which might be a PDF or might be an Excel file. So what if your Microsoft Office is not there in the computer or it's corrupted? What if there is no Adobe issue that comes in? So you have designed the bot, right? The bot has to open the PDF. So the bot needs certain application through which it can read. The bot is capable of reading it directly, but as these processes, they are opening it the PDF through Adobe. So Adobe needs to be checked. Do we need to use Adobe, or we have to go and use uipath's core technology to directly read the documents from the PDF or attach it from somewhere? So all these things comes here. So this is how we design the as is process. And at each and every step at the bottom, you see we have the process steps, we have the application used, we have the AHT, that means average handling time. So my step one takes 5 minutes, step two takes 2 minutes, step three takes 3 minutes, and step four takes 6 minutes. So these are the average handling time of each and every phase. So this is how your process map gets designed when you are designing the as is process. Okay, so any questions before we talk about the to be process? Any doubts that you have for the as is process diagram?
Quick question for step 4. That's the only place I think you said application 2 changes, right?
Sorry, can you repeat?
For step 4.
Oh yes, correct. So what I said is, as it is mentioned as application 1, 2, and 3, each and at every step, it's a diagram that we are trying to show, right? So at each and every step, my application's involvement might not be the same, or it might be the same. It depends on the process or your project that you have undertaken. So that's why I tried to give an example where in my reporting project, my step 1, I'm using Google Chrome and ServiceNow. Step 2 also it's Google Chrome and ServiceNow. Step 3, I'm using again Google Chrome. I mean, I'm downloading the report. So that means it might be a PDF, or it might be an Excel, or it might be anything, or any other extension file. So I have to look for that extension file, what sort of file it is, and again my Google Chrome is involved. The fourth step is I'm sending out email. That means I'm attaching the files and sending out. So my application involved is either an Outlook mail or it might be a Gmail, whichever is being used by your company. So that needs to be analyzed. So my application 1 becomes my Gmail or Outlook. My second application is the extension, the attachment of the file. If it's an Excel file, that means I obviously have to mention MS Excel or MS Office as my application 2, because that's what is involved at my step 4. Clear?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Perfect.
Paul,
Mhm.
do you have to also like mention like the let's say for example the version of your application and stuff like that? Do you have to like go like deep into those specifics of the application, or just for this
No.
process you just need to mention just let's say for example if it's Oracle application, this step is you have to use Oracle or you have to use Outlook, but do you have to go like into specifics of that application?
Oh yes, again, it depends on how complex is your project. So
Mm,
if your project or how stable is your application. So let's say you are dealing with an ERP application and it has multiple instances, right? So if you talk about SAP has a lot of modules, and let's say 6 to 7 modules are involved in your project, where you have to log into one instance for payroll data, then for finance data you have to log into another instance, then for client information you have to log into another instance. So that means you have to do a more deep dive of your SAP process or SAP application because multiple instances are involved. But here, when we talk about, like as I explained here at Google Chrome and ServiceNow, here we have to do a minimal due diligence that, what if Google Chrome crashes? What is the purpose of mentioning or outlining those applications is what if the application is down or what if the application goes wrong someday, how do we handle it? This is because it's all about, enacting a human action where the bot is dependent upon the environment or the applications to which it's going to interact on a daily basis. So it's not about that always the bot who is going to fault or your program is wrong. It's also dependent upon the environment or the applications to which it's going to talk. So for example, you are fetching the data from an Oracle database, right? Your SQL connection is down today. The bot is running. Will the bot be able to fetch the data? No. So it's not a bot dependency. The bot is programmed and it is working fine. But since bot is dependent on your Oracle server to fetch the data, your server is unavailable today. So obviously your bot execution is going to fail. It's not that the bot is not working. There's a very, very bad misconception of bot's performance across the industry. Anything when the bot goes wrong, they say the bot fails. I've seen it in many companies, many business team. They say, hey, the bot is not designed perfectly. They don't understand that the server is down. How do you expect a human to download a report from a server which is down? It's same with the bot, right? Again, human have a thought process, they have a cognitive mind, they can go and try to find an alternate source. If the server is down, they will try to log into some application and take it. But is your bot that intelligent? No, your bot is not a human. Eventually, it's just enacting what you have programmed it for, right? So if you program it in such a way that no, if my server is down, I expect it to go to the application manually and download the report. If you code it in such a way, then obviously it will go and do it, right? But unless and until I code that portion, I cannot expect the bot to perform. So that's why application due diligence is very important because your bot's performance is dependent on each and every application at each phase. That's why there's a digital interaction, or I gave the assignment of application integration because UiPath's bot is talking to multiple applications at each and every phase. So your application integration, that's why I'm stressing on your application availability, test environment, application usage, because it's not about the bot, it's about the entire infrastructure or the environment that you have. Anything goes wrong would impact the bot, and anything that impacts the bot impacts your output. So that's why creating an effective analysis of a process, effective analysis of your applications is very, very important. That's why your technical feasibility and all these things are of much more importance at an RPA level. Clear?
Paul,
Yeah.
one last question.
Mhm.
So if we connect this to the last assignment that you gave us, how many licenses
Mhm.
would be in use on that particular process?
The licenses I get, oh no, that's completely different. You
Okay.
cannot. I That is about the bot licenses, UiPath licenses of bots. Here,
Also,
this
mm-hmm.
application. Now, my bot is only one. Okay,
So
so
it's okay.
sorry, go ahead. You can ask the question and then I'll answer it in a complete way.
No. I was trying to say, so it's one license being used, you would say, or no licenses at all?
No, so see, my bot license of UiPath is different, and my application involved in the project or my process is very different. My one single bot, let's say I have one single license that my company has purchased from UiPath. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that I can run only one process. I can run a bot license. Once I have a bot available with the license, the bot has 24 hours. I can run n number of processes in the 24 hours, and each and every time one process is getting executed, I can queue the next process, I can queue the third process, I can queue my fourth project, I can queue my fifth project. So UiPath license of bots are not related to the application involvement that we are talking about. So your bot license is where UiPath is, you are buying it from UiPath so that your bot executes, right? Now when your bot starts executing, it has to interact with all these applications as a part of completing your project or your process, right? So it has to go through the every step that a human does. So license of bot is separate, and when we talk about the applications in the various projects, that's separate. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect, no problem. So now when we talk about the as is process, let's come to the to be process. Now the diagrams are very similar because it needs to be similar, right? Because whatever is the as is process done manually, the similar process is being designed or automated. So my as is process should be similar to my to be process. So in my to be process, what we're going to talk design is, in my to be process, we're going to still talk about the same first step with application involvement, step 2, step 3, step 4. So I said it's a reporting project. Step 1, I'm logging into the application, I'm down, step 2, I'm down clicking on a button and downloading the report. Step 3, I'm saving the file in my machine and whatever. Step 4 is I'm sending an email to the client with the attachment, right? This is my as is process. The same process needs to be automated in the to be process. Okay, so similar, step 1, application involved service now Google Chrome. Step 2, application involved service now Google Chrome. Step 3, Microsoft Office PDF or whatever is there. Step 4, again Gmail or Outlook, and again my MS Office or PDF reader or whatever it is there. Now the only difference between these two diagrams is we do not have an average handling time calculation for the to be process because we do not have the bot developed yet. So unless and until the bot is developed and it is running, how can you expect to calculate how much time the bot is taking? That's why if you see on the to be process, your average handling time, it is mentioned as step 1, it takes A minutes, step 2, it takes B minutes, step 3, it takes 3 C minutes, step 4, it takes D minutes. Now, when we spoke about, that we do once the bot is developed, it goes for a performance review and all those things. That's where your to be process is compared with your as is process. So now, when we talk about the performance analysis of a bot, what the team gonna do here is they will take step 1. They will say, okay, step 1's average handling time was 5 minutes by human. What is the time that the bot is taking to complete step 1? It has to be minimum, not more than 1 minute first. If a human is taking 5 minutes to perform a task, if I design a bot, I think not more than 1 minute should be taken by the bot to complete that. If it is taking more than a minute, then there is a performance issue, because the eventual goal is to automate it, because to execute it much faster and in an efficient way. If my average handling time of a process manually is 5 minutes and my average handling time of my to be processed by a bot is 4 minutes, why should there's 1 minute difference. So there's only 1 minute benefit that I'm getting. So my benefit or ROI is very less, right? So my bot's performance needs to be much faster. So if I say that my as is process, how much is the total time that is taken by my as is process? Step 1 takes 5 minutes, plus step 2 takes 2 minutes, plus step 3 takes 3 minutes, and step 4 takes 6 minutes. So manual process contains 16 minutes of work, right? This is my as is process. Now when I develop the bot and it goes and we perform the measurement and we see the execution of the bot, okay, and we come back and write it down, the specific timings for each and every step. So if it is an overall 16 minute step, trust me, your bot should be able to complete this 4 step in not more than 5 minutes. So that's where your credibility of RPA comes in. If a manual process takes 16 minutes, bot needs to do it in 5 minutes. So there is a difference of how much? 11 minutes. So that's where your ROI comes in. That's where your management will say there is a benefit. That's when your client will say, okay, I'm saving time. 1 minute, 30 seconds, 1.5 minutes, nobody is giving a damn. They'll say, okay, why I should develop a bot for a 1 minute gap? No. When they see this gap is huge, okay, I told 5 minutes. Let's say effectively, if the developer has designed the bot, it might take 2 minutes also. So 16 minutes of manual work compared with 2 minutes of the same work being done by a bot, a total saving of 14 minutes. So the more your marginal gap of average handling time comes, that's more your ROI, that all those things we analyzed, your ROI, your process improvement, client satisfaction, all these things comes here. So the more is your marginal gap between as is process and to be process, the more efficient is your bot, and we can project that this bot is working much faster than human and is able to complete similar number of steps. So any questions in terms of comparison of the as is and the to be process? Yes.
So as a clarification, as is the manual process and to be is the bot process.
True, absolutely true. Yep, you got that right. As is that's self-defined, how it is going on today. As is, it is what it is defined. To be is what gonna happen when the bot is designed.
Now, Paul, as far as the ROI is concerned, now if the to be process is, is taking almost the same time as the assess process, does the client just, stop the whole project even after going this far, or
No.
what happens?
So what would happen is they would, if your client complains that, hey, your manual process, your as is process is 16 minutes to complete 4 steps. Your to be process when the bot is developed is 13 minutes. So why there's a marginal gap of only 3 minutes? So we don't see any benefit. So that means the developers who have developed the bot, they haven't made it as a robust or that much, so the way that they have designed the bot, it's taking a lot of time. So that means there is a problem with how the bot is coded. So that means then it comes back to the project owners or the project managers to come back and talk to the developer and say, hey, what you have designed is taking 13 minutes of time, wherein my as is process is 16. So that there's a question from the client why the marginal gap is of only 3. So I think we need to reevaluate the code and we need to optimize the performance. So what happens then? Then the project manager, solution architect, and everybody will sit with the developer, and the developer will try to see which activities or which portion of the code is taking much time. Okay, whether the time consumed more here is in downloading the report, whether it's a bot failure or it might be an application dependency. So let's say if they are downloading a report from a server, okay, which is my step 3. Now the file size is very high. So actually when the report is downloaded, it's taking 3 minutes, 4 minutes. So that means it's not a fault with the bot. So all this performance analysis would be then done to check whether it's an issue with the code or it's an issue with the application on which the bot is dependent. And as I said, mentioned before, it's always the mentality of the business that the bot is not performing, but it's not always on the bot. It might be taking time in step 3 where it is downloading the file size is high. Okay, so you are running it and it is taking 3.5 to 4 minutes to download the file. So what they will do is they will go and try to see, is there any alternative way that I can download the file faster? So if they're downloading it manually from the application, it's taking, let's say, 4 minutes or 5 minutes. So it's increasing my average handling time to 13 minutes. So if I reduce my 5 minutes, then my handling time becomes 13 minus 5. Right? So what is going to happen is then they will try to find an alternative, whether I can directly download the server report from the database. So then they will go and approach the client with all their findings, that these are the parameters or points where the bot is taking time because it's dependent on those applications, and these are the mitigation processes that we have. So if we are downloading it through the application, it's taking this much time. If you give us an access to the database, and if we download the report directly from the database, we're going to save 7 minutes or let's say 10 minutes. then the entire process is getting completed in 5 minutes or whatever. Then the client will say, okay, then if then your solution is redesigned. Okay, then instead of downloading from application, that needs to be downloaded from a database, so a SQL query would be passed so that the bot gets the data directly from the database, and then it copies it to an Excel file and then sends out an email. So let's say your resolution gave you a benefit of 7 minutes. Okay, so I mean that's the difference that comes in. So eventually it was 13, now minus 7 minutes. So now your end-to-end execution time is 6 minutes. Now it makes sense. Your as is process is 16 minutes. My to be process is 6 minutes. So there is a marginal gap of 10 minutes, which is my benefit. So this is how it goes.
Thank you.
Okay. Perfect. Now the next topic is, I'm not going to explain much on this because it's a part of the assignment, but I'm just going to give you guys a very brief explanation so that you can perform the assignment. So process mapping, generally when we talk, has a special method called as SIPOC, which is supplier inputs, process output, customers requirement. Okay. Now as a part of the assignment, I'm gonna tell you what you need to do. But SIPOC is actually a technique that is used by various clients to measure or map the process. So SIPOC is nothing but, first it starts with the supplier. Supplier is nothing but where we talk about our raw materials, sources, and what. So here we're gonna talk about our raw materials. Our sources are various inputs that we take. What are the output parameters that we're gonna have? So all these things that we decided are relevant here. Next, our input comes in. What is the manpower? What is the resource? What is the equipment? Then we talk about the output. Then we talk about the customers, and then we talk about the requirements. And then when we talk about the flow, we have a look. We look for customer segment. We try to find the customer need. We identify the critical needs. We develop the prototype. We test the prototype, and we go to the production. So this is an extra method that comes in where some companies or some processes might involve SIPOC as a parameter or as a framework to map your process. So you must be aware of it. So this is what it is. So you can learn more it over the internet. And now I'm going to tell you later what is the assignment that we need to do for this. So before we wrap up, so I think I have 2 more topics to complete, and I'll just wrap it up. So we're going to talk about the input analysis and the output analysis, as we already spoke about process metrics and various aspects. Now inputs and outputs are also very important to be analyzed. Okay, now I identify what are the input that needs to be given at a process level and at a granular level is very important. Identify dependencies to other sub processes. So what happens sometimes is an input of one process, an output of one process is the input to the next process. Okay, so that means your second sub process is dependent on your first process. So unless and until you have the output from your process 1, your process 2 cannot execute, for example. So that's where your identification of dependencies are important. Then we talk about the inputs when we definitely talk about the application. So let's say my input is coming from an application, right? As in the reporting project I explained that my report comes from an application called ServiceNow. I have to download. That means my input is dependent on ServiceNow, right? Now when we talk about application type, we have to see that from which inputs are to be accessed. Is it a file? Is it a screen? Is it an email? Or is it a scan copy? Or is it an application? Input structure, templates from which identified inputs are to be captured. Input fields, unique identifiers to capture the required field. Let's say in my step 3, I said I have to click a button so that the report gets downloaded. So that is my identification field of the input. I have to identify that this is the button where the bot needs to click to fetch the report. So that's the unique identifier I have to identify, and they put it in the design document. And input location from which, let's say my input is a file. My input is I have to get an Excel file is my input. So my file location is very important, where this file is to be saved, or from where the bot needs to read that file, what's the location from where the bot should fetch that file. So all these things is very important. So application type, input structure, identify field, and input location is what we do a very deep analysis when we talk about the inputs. Similarly, when we talk about the output, We have to identify the output that already exists or it needs to be generated by the bot. Now, what does it mean? What happens is, if you talk about the reporting project that I spoke, the moment I click the download button, the report is downloaded. That means my output file is ready. Okay, that means from an application, I'm having the output file. But in some projects, the bot needs to create the output file. So for example, let's say my reporting process is still downloading the report. So the moment I download, my output is ready. But if I say that no, I have to now filter that report and then generate a new file, that means the filtering needs to be done by the bot and a new file needs to be created. So that means the new file is a report or is an output which is generated by the bot, right? So these are the two differences. So we have to analyze whether the the output is already existing when it's completing, or the bot needs to perform something to complete the output. Okay, then we talk about the output type. A new record in an app, a report file, or a file. Is it a new record that needs to be created, or it's an existing record? It could be a file, it could be an app, it could be a report. Output type. Similarly, when we talk about the input file folder location, we have to talk about where my output needs to be saved. What is the location where the client wants the report to be available, and all those things. Attributes to capture, destination, structure, content, trigger. So what is my destination location for my output file? What is the structure that they want it to be? What is the content of the reporting file that they want it to be? Okay, so all these things are designed under the output type, and these are the parameters that actually gets into your document. Okay, when we create a PDD and we talk about the PDD tomorrow, we will see that these are the points which are there inside your documentation. And this is a basic diagram which just shows you that my input is there, my processing is happening, and then I have my output. So the bot is taking inputs, it is doing some activities, it is completing your process 1, process 2, process 3, and then it is doing it is generating your output, which is like, there could be multiple outputs, there could be single output, that based on whatever is your project or whatever is your process designed. Okay, so with this, I think we're done for the session. So I'm just going to explain you the assignment real quick and see if there are any questions. So assignment 6, so as I spoke about two frameworks before, MI and time and motion. So I want you guys to go a bit much more deeper into it and do a research on MI, which is management information, and time and motion for process analysis, and just see what are, and make more research and try to make a deep understanding that if you are trying to analyze a process, how do you how do you utilize those MI and time and motion techniques, learn about it more and try to map or complete the research on this and try to submit your assignment on management information and time and motion process analysis. What is it all about? What are the inputs taken? What is its structure? How do we do the duration analysis and all those things? And I want you guys to do a more research on SIPOC as well. So that's why I just gave the process map. So if you Google out, you'll find it, but please don't copy entire thing from the Google. Try to read it from the internet, but try to have your own understanding as a submission of your assignments. You're going to find a similar approach to the SIPOC method. So try to go deep into each and every module, okay, and try to analyze it and then do the assignment. So your understanding is what we need to do here, because it's not that something mandatory you need, but in case you go to a company where your company is utilizing SIPOC and you would be like, like it comes that there's a suddenly you would land up on Mars. So not to happen or to avoid that. So at least the understanding is required, and then based on your work related where you go and implement, you can learn it on the go or on the job and then get more understanding of it. So just have an understanding and try to get a knowledge or a good understanding of these two concepts or frameworks in research process analysis. Okay, so that's all I have for the day. Before I wrap up, any other questions?